book, Learning to Walk in the Dark, Barbara Brown Taylor tells the story of a French boy named Jacques Lussan. Jacques Lussan, who lost his sight in an accident at the age of 7. During a scuffle at school, he fell against the corner of a desk, and the arm of his glasses pierced one eye and severely damaged the other. And when he awoke in the hospital, he was completely blind. Now, in the days that followed, people all around him spoke about the terrible darkness that had entered into his life. In those days, blindness often pushed people to the margins of society. But within days of the accident, Lussan discovered something surprising. He later wrote, "I had completely lost sight of my eyes. I could not see the light of the world anymore. Yet the light was still there." He came to believe that the source of light was not only outside of us. The light, he said, lives where life itself lives, within us. So reflecting on his story, Barbara Brown Taylor poses this question: what have you learned in seasons of darkness that you couldn't have learned otherwise? So I ask you again, what have you learned in seasons of darkness that you couldn't have learned otherwise? Most of us know something about seasons of darkness. They may come to us through grief or in illness, in times of uncertainty or disappointment, or when we experience profound loss. They are not seasons we would choose. And yet, sometimes it is precisely in those moments that we begin to see things we couldn't see before. So the question echoes in a powerful way when we hear Jesus say, "I am the light of the world." Because the light of which Jesus speaks is not just the light that our eyes perceive. It is the light of God, God's presence, God's wisdom, the insight that God gives us. It is what breaks in moments when we're struggling to see clearly, particularly in darkness. In today's gospel, the man whom Jesus and his disciples encounter is a man who has never seen the light of the world, at least not with his eyes. Seeing him, this man who is blind from birth, the disciples immediately ask the question that reveals how blindness was understood in Jesus' time. "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" They assume that someone has to be to blame. If something difficult happened in their culture, then there must be a cause. Somebody must have failed, or they must be a sinner. But Jesus refutes the assumption that they make entirely. Neither this man nor his parents sinned, he says. Because from the beginning, Jesus has always challenged the way that people see. And throughout our gospel, we watch as the people there struggle with what they think they see. The neighbors are confused. Is this the same guy who used to sit and beg? Some of the religious leaders question. They question the guy again and again because they cannot make sense of what they think they know and what they are actually seeing right before their eyes. Others are amazed, some are curious, but many resist what they are seeing because it just doesn't compute or align. And if we are honest with ourselves, most of us can size up a complete stranger in about 3 seconds. We know how easily this happens in our own lives. Think about how quickly we form opinions about people when we first see them. Someone walks into a room. They're dressed a certain way. They're carrying themselves with a certain confidence. Maybe they have visible tattoos or piercings or different color hair. Maybe they just look unusual. But within seconds, our minds begin filling in the rest of the story. Their story. And it's before we've even had a chance to hear it. We make assumptions about what we see. But often, how often, do we later discover that the person that we thought we understood at a glance was entirely different from what we imagined? How often are we later surprised? Today's scripture reminds us how easily our sight can mislead us. In the reading from 1 Samuel, the prophet Samuel is sent by God to anoint the next king of Israel. And when he sees Jesse's eldest son, tall and impressive, he assumes that this must surely be the one that God has chosen. But God interrupts Samuel's assumptions with these words: "The Lord does not see as mortals see. They look on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart." So Samuel has to keep looking. And one by one, Jesse's sons pass before him, and none of them are the one. Until finally, the youngest is brought forward. The one that no one ever imagined could be king. The one that nobody really could see. David. And then Samuel, finally seeing as God sees, anoints David, and the Spirit comes upon him. And in our gospel, we witness another moment where the folks are struggling to see. They're confronted by what they see, but it's the one who has never seen who begins to see with clearer and clearer and clearer vision. What does the man say when he's first asked about what happened and who did it? He says, "The man called Jesus." And then he declares he's a prophet. And then, if the man were not from God, he could do nothing. So we watch as his sight progressively increases. Not literally, physically, but spiritually. After seeking and finding the man, the one that they cast out, Jesus finds him, and then he speaks these words: "I came into the world so that those who do not see may see, and those who may see may become blind." Theologian Diana Butler Bass observes that seeing is one of those curious words in Scripture that refers both to physical sight but also spiritual understanding. And sometimes, she notes, it is the sighted who do not see and the blind who do. And there, my friends, is our aha. Because sight does not guarantee vision, and blindness does not prevent it. In the gospel story, not everyone refuses to see, but others resist, unable to see. And I think that often our resistance to seeing what is in front of us or to acknowledging somebody else's truth has much more to do with fear than it has to do with our stubbornness or our certainty. If what has happened there in Israel is really, truly of God, if God is at work in this man in ways that no one ever could imagine or expect, and if they are willing to believe this, then something about their understanding of the world and of God is going to have to change. And I think that's the scary part. Because when we hear what somebody else has experienced, or we see something we can't explain and they tell you that it's a holy encounter, if we can bridge it, it does something to us. It expands our understanding, but it may also call to question what we've always held as truth. So what have we learned in our seasons of darkness that we could not have learned otherwise? For Laurel, it was that blindness to the world's light is what actually allowed him to discover the light that was within him. And for the man in today's gospel, the blindness is a gift because it became the holy place where God's light and love broke into his life in a new way, a way that he could not have ever expected. Now, he recovered his sight, yes, but the gospel beckons you and I to go deeper. Jesus is pointing to what's possible when we begin to see the world and others as God sees. What is possible if we were to see beyond the appearances, to see beyond the assumptions that we have and that we make? What would it look like if we were to see beyond the quick assessments that we make about each other? Because God sees beyond the appearances into the heart. And so it leaves us with some things to ponder. Who or what might God be inviting you to see with new eyes? Is there something or someone or an opinion, something that you are clinging to tightly in your certainty? Maybe it is an assumption, maybe it's a fear that you just can't release, but with God's help you might be able to surrender and see it as God sees it. What would your life look like? What would my life look like if we were to commit to practicing seeing as God sees, and to set aside our assumptions and our attachments to what we think we see and what is so? How might the relationships that we share with one another in our community be altered? How might new life come shining into our midst?